going to talk today about the impact that OKRs can have on your organization in one specific way, which is focus. 90% of our customers name focus as one of the most important aspects. Basically the reason why they actually introduce OKRs, because there's so many things going on in the organizations. And of course, OKRs are a strategy execution tool. So in the end, we need to make sure that teams can actually focus on the right things, which are usually the strategy, but of course, keeping a balance with everything that's going on outside of the strategy as well. It can be relevant. So a couple of words to myself. My name is Alessia. I am in the training and enablement team at Workpath and been part of the team for many years now and have trained a couple of you actually. So nice to connect it back again. And yeah, I've more or less trained and coached over 800 people over the years in OKRs, and really happy to be here with you today to share a couple of our insights on how in our customer projects we achieved focus through OKRs. If you want to connect afterwards, feel free to also shoot me a message. So who is Workpath even? We are a software company, first and foremost, but we also have other branches, so to say. Because we are an OKR software, we know that the support in the implementation of the method is paramount to the success of our customers. So we take a lot of care in focusing on really helping our customers succeed with the OKR process, and we have several mechanisms on how to do that. Except for the platform itself that can already provide a lot of value, we are very adamant in connecting our customers with each other in peer groups through events such as the quarterly conference that we have as well on the 29th of September. My colleague Teresa will send you in the wrap-up email a couple of informations about that as well. And we also have an online community that you can join. But except for the, let's say, community aspects, we also do a lot of enablement, a lot of certifications and trainings, and we do a lot of research because we can basically provide a lot of insights to our customers from our other customer projects, and we do a lot of research in the, let's say, the topics branching out beyond OKRs, and since OKRs also touch upon a lot of different processes in the organizations. Then we also have a couple of partners that we work with and try to complete kind of the triangle around the software through that. So basically helping our customers with more intensive consulting through our partners in succeeding with the OKR method. So a couple of questions up front. We already had the where are you from question asked, and the second one I would like to ask you, just to see who is in the call and what your knowledge levels are. So do you already work with OKRs in your company? If yes, no, or kind of, there should be a poll popping up in a second where you can just click, and let's see what the results are here. So a couple of people that already work with OKRs, some say kind of. I mean, sometimes it is the kind of answer represents more that we have just started with OKRs. We can't really say that we're working with it, but we have done like a couple of baby steps, maybe in a pilot, in order to basically find out if OKRs actually work for us, which we also recommend. Very good. So we have most people who have already worked with OKRs or kind of, and a couple of new starters. Very well. Next question then. How would you rate your OKR knowledge? From 1, I have read the Wikipedia article, to 10, I feel I like I invented OKRs. So let's see what your knowledge levels are on that scale. That very scientific scale, by the way. But it's a good thing to kind of like estimate where we are starting with OKRs. Very well. So as expected, the knowledge level is quite high. And since our topic is also quite specific on certain best practices we're going to share, it definitely makes sense that the distribution is around the 6s and 7s in this call. Very good. Good to know that we're starting on that level. So I'm going to go into one of the topics that we kind of like start every project with our customers around. So we're going to have a look at why do we talk about focus even. And after this, we're going to go into the best practices we have developed around focus. But just to open the space up a bit, the first question we ask our customers, why do you even want to introduce OKRs? And here, I think one of the most important things is that you cannot do everything that it says here. And you probably also have seen these kinds of principles before with other agile methodologies. And that's exactly the point. OKRs are very complementary to other agile frameworks that you could use. What is important, though, is that you kind of make up your mind what is the exact thing we want to reach through OKRs. You know that Workpath is about outcome management. We don't only care about like let's say the strategies that you use, but actually the outcomes that come with introducing and implementing these strategies. So this is also why we approach our customer projects from the same angle. What are the outcomes that you want to actually achieve? And there are several different things you can achieve, from engagement and team empowerment, people actually thinking about strategy on the team level and not only on the organizational level. Alignment, that people actually, when they set the strategy, they know what the others are doing and what is expected from them and who other goals they're paying into. Metric and data-driven decision-making. We are very adamant about having metric key results that actually represent value propositions in our objectives. So basically, measuring if we have achieved a value for a customer. And then, of course, continuous learning through retros and reviews about the process itself. I'm going to start here in the bottom. One of the most important things is customer orientation and customer focus, outcome focus. And this does not only mean customer, but the internal customers as well. So actually, what increment of value creation can I create in my process that I can validate through metrics as well? So this is why whoever has done the masterclass with us knows that we actually write the customer of and the beneficiary of the work that we do into the OKRs themselves. The purpose aspect is also a very important one. If I know how my increment of value creation pays into the other aspects that are being worked on in the company, that can be very empowering. So I know even though I'm not impacting the end customer, maybe the colleagues that I'm impacting in turn do. So this is a very important aspect as well. And one of the basic ones that often get forgotten about, especially when you work with the tool, is that the main benefit of OKRs is the transparency. I know what the others are doing. I know if I need something from somebody else, why have they planned their sprints or their projects accordingly. I know what goals they're aiming for. So I can basically be more patient and even more understanding on why somebody's maybe not helping me, or maybe I can better understand where the interfaces lie between us and where the double work could be, and also something we can avoid through having a transparency. And then last but not least, the focus topic that we're going to talk about today. And focus can be achieved in many different ways. Most of our customers kind of like say, we have too many things that people work on, and this is why we want to focus them onto the strategy. There's other aspects where they say, I want to focus them on, let's say, doing fewer things during their OKR sprints or the OKR cycles. There's different layers to focus, and we're going to have a look at a couple of these aspects in a second. But first we want to have a look at where does focus even come into play in the OKR process. So those of you who know the OKR process a bit know the cycle. It is constituted from we start with setting organizational priorities. This is sometimes the highest organizational level that does OKRs, and sometimes it's let's say the C-level. So there are a couple of priorities set, and here we can see that we have the focus icon next to it as well. And this is where we can kind of like orchestrate the value creation in a certain direction to make sure that people actually know what is expected, what would they on top like us to focus on. And then, of course, there is an aspect in the drafting that comes later when the teams actually see, okay, this is what is expected. Let's see what we could do. Let's see how we could impact this. This is where the OKRs on the team and department levels are being drafted. And here as well, we can apply a lot of focus here, and we have to, because otherwise we have too many topics that we write about. Then just skipping over a couple of, just briefly mentioning the other aspects is then we would align the OKRs that we have drafted, we would refine them, and then there would be a kickoff where everybody would know what the others are doing, and we start into the cycle in a very motivated way. And then we would go into the execution phase, and here, of course, we have to check back in with the OKRs, see from the initiatives, from the epics, the user stories, the projects that we have done, did they actually impact OKRs? Are we working on OKR topics enough? These are the questions that we would ask in the check-ins. And here you can again see the focus icon. We want to hear as well, make sure we are focusing on the right things. And then we have retrospectives and reviews that probably most of you are aware of what you do with them. So basically learn from the process. Let's go a bit about why focus matters a bit. One, nothing is harder than setting goals from the top and making sure that the value creation below is orchestrated in a way that actually contributes to that while still maintaining a certain degree of empowerment. We can mandate everything top down, but then we have the danger that maybe the goals don't make sense because we don't have the expertise on the top, or people don't feel empowered and are rather in like a lean back attitude because they think that they can't even influence what they work on, which also kills motivation a bit, we know. And then if everything is a priority, nothing is. That's also a very important thing. If everything is important, we are clearly not setting any priorities right now. Then we have a couple of aspects that are more about the, let's say, the capacity of the teams. So a lot of teams, they don't even know how much time they have on OKRs, so they overbook themselves. And then they're frustrated because they can't reach their goals. So this is something where we actually want to go into the topic of focus through capacity planning as well. It's especially also important if OKRs are like drowned out by the everyday work. So we all know that we have shiny goals in the beginning that we spend a lot of time working on, like working in producing, but then in the end, we can't really work on them because there's so many ad hoc topics coming in, for instance. So this is something we want to avoid. And there's a couple of best practices I can share with you there as well. And in general, there's oftentimes, I don't work with any customers that do not have too many input factors. There's so many things that they could work on. There's so many strategic artifacts around there, department strategies, KPIs, personal goals, maybe even, that kind of are conflicting sometimes, or we don't have any transparency about what we should even consider. So this is also a big aspect where focus and where providing focus is also a leadership task, right? If you have too many things we could focus on as a team and we cannot decide, then we need some sort of prioritization. So let's have a look at how OKRs can help activate this principle. And I brought 3 different best practices that I want to go into a bit more in detail. So one is the vertical alignment topic. And this is about basically making sure that we have a good split between a strategic orchestration and empowerment. And I can go into how we do that in a second. Then focus in the OKR drafting. This is about the amount of OKRs and the time that we have to even spend on strategic topics in the cycle and having transparency about that. And then the check-ins are a way to not lose track during the cycle, because you spend a lot of time in the beginning on the OKRs and then they often get drowned out a bit, and the check-ins are a mechanism to avoid that as well. Let's have a look at vertical alignment. And looking to the right here, we have a diagram of how, let's say, the OKR architecture and the structure is usually set up. So in the beginning, we always have like a highest level of OKRs. They sometimes are, if they're on the organization level, this level usually writes yearly OKRs, because I don't know any like general managers or C-level leaders that have the time to do these draftings every let's say every quarter, like the lower levels sometimes do. So we have, they need to be informed by strategic pillars, often by missions and visions, agile transformation strategies, customer requirements, different KPIs, and they are informed like, what would I set as a goal? How do I want as a leadership team set the strategic focus? That's kind of the flashlighty thing you see here at the bottom. The message, however, is not that I cascade this down so that I take this and slice the elephant down to the lower level. But the trick is rather that I set the focus, the guardrails, and then the teams themselves, and by teams I mean like business unit leads or team leads, to then kind of understand what is the filter that we want to apply. So this leaves the empowerment on the team level while still setting some sort of strategic focus. And here we have the situation that usually the job of the middle management level is the one that's trickiest, so to say, because there you have to land the right level of granularity that it still provides some sort of translation of the strategic priorities to the level below, but without naming the output. So the actual things I want you to do in order to achieve that. So what we try to do here is to empower the teams to set their own filters and to decide what do we consider. And of course, one aspect that we consider is the top level input. So this is kind of like leaving a lot of, let's say, availability and possibility to apply, for the teams to apply their own filter while still giving them some sort of strategic direction. And by the way, if you have any questions in the meantime, there's a Q&A section that you can use that you can put your questions in for later as well if you have questions along the way now. One thing that I want to be very adamant about, though, is this is not kind of like a pick and choose situation. Sometimes most teams that I work with, they have things they have to do. They have operational work, daily work. They have some sort of long-term strategic commitments that they have been having for years with their business units or with other stakeholders that they can't really choose what to work on entirely. So I think this is also very, very I'm sometimes like missing the honesty about this factor a bit in the discussion around OKRs, because there are things that are non-negotiable that I just need to do. However, they probably don't take up all of my time, and I probably can set strategic goals on my team level as well. My point is rather be very clear on what's non-negotiable from the top. Let's say if the business unit lead says we need to do this because the board of directors said that we have to, then that's something we actually need to do, and there's not really much like room for negotiation. But at the same time, point out where is the wiggle room still to actually work on things that you as a team deem important. Summing up a bit, the bad practices, let's say, is cascading OKRs. So making sure that you not trying to actually focus through kind of like slicing the elephant and telling everybody this is how you need to pay into the goal on the top. This puts a lot of pressure on the leadership level as well, because they probably think, oh, I need to think about every goal that everybody else is setting down below, and every topic that need to be represented. And as you've seen here, there are some topics that are not represented at all in the top level ones, but maybe they kind of relate to something bigger that they're working on. So make sure that you don't put too much pressure on leadership to think for you, but at the same time, have some sort of guidance and strategic direction. And that's already like the third one. So thinking everything needs to pay into the top level goals. That's also not the case. Sometimes I can do something that makes sense for me, but maybe not for everybody else, and not everybody else needs to kind of like have the measurement on the higher level of what they do. And then there's also a factor that is little to no vertical alignment. And here I brought an example from our tool as well, where we kind of like simulated a low degree of alignment in our graph overview. And here you can see that we have a couple of teams that are aligning to the top level goals, but everything else is kind of like open. And when it comes to vertical alignment, it kind of depends on your own company culture. Do you have the problem that it's more kind of like focused on do people actually want to think for themselves a lot, and do they want to set their own goals that are not aligned to what you do at the top, or are they rather used to being like very top-down driven? So this is just a good example on if nobody on the outer rim, so to say, like pays into the central, the organizational topics, we also have the same problem as if it's too much in the other direction. Very well. Second topic then. So we had vertical alignment as one of the best practices, and here having that openness is crucial. Then second topic is the focus in the OKR drafting itself. And here we have a couple of two guiding questions you should ask yourself. So how can we provide, how can I make sure that I have enough enough focus and enough, let's say, realistic planning in my OKR process. So the first question is, how much time do we even have to spend on OKRs? And this is about knowing, do you work more operatively, more strategically? How much time do you have for strategic goals? And then estimate the capacity that you have in your team. On the other hand, once I know how much time I have for strategic topics, I need to kind of like open the problem space a bit and see how many topics do I even have to think about, and sort them and have them all on one view is one of the most important best practices I can give you. And then you would, of course, write OKRs about the topics, and then, of course, link back to the capacity planning and see like how much of my capacity is going to be put on which OKR. So these are two guiding questions that I would like to give to you to kind of like better structure the focus in your drafting process. When it comes to the question, how much time do we spend on OKRs, there is a debate on, is OKR just a strategy execution tool? Or do we also have, and how much operative topics do we have? And here the question is rather, there is a natural split within your own work where you would lie in this dynamic. You always have some degree of implementation or strategy execution work and some degree of operative work. And it does not really matter which category you fall in. If you might be strategy and product, you have more strategic work. If you are manufacturing, logistics, a service center, you probably have more operative work. It does not matter where you lie, where your split is, your natural split. It's more a question of how do you manage that. And here having some sort of transparency of what is normal for me is very important to know, like, is it, if I'm in one of these categories, so to say, I would not set 7 OKRs that are about strategic work. So this is basically the important dynamic that we have to think about. So, and of course, if I know how much time I'm spending in general on strategic work, then I probably need to do some more estimations around this as well. Like how many members do I have in my teams? How much will these teams be available in this period of time that my OKR cycle is? And will there be buffers that I have to set in? I have one customer that says, we have so much ad hoc work, we need to have a buffer for this ad hoc things that keep like being pushed on us. Maybe because our surroundings are not working with OKRs and they don't really understand our rhythms yet. So this is something very important that you need to think about. And this determines how many OKRs you can even write. So having some sort of capacity estimation that splits operative and strategic work, and maybe even accounts for your collaborations that you're working with. So maybe you have some teams that always need something from you that you can plan in as well. And this is a very huge success factor for the, let's say, for the success of your OKR implementation or your OKR execution of the goals, because you can only work on the amount of topic that you have time for, right? Logically. And there's surprisingly little teams that know how much time they can actually spend on this. So I would really urge you to do some sort of capacity planning, whether it's with a tool like ours, or if you just have an Excel sheet. Have these factors subtracted from the amount of work that you can, the amount of team capacity that you have. And this way you will be able to have much better and much more realistic planning. So much for the question, how much time do we have to spend on OKRs? And then we have our filter again that we set as our team said, and where we ask what are the topics that we need to consider that could factor into our choice of the OKR. And there can be team strategies, there can be high-level key results that we use, KPIs, strategic artifacts, ad hoc top-level priorities that we need to consider. There can be so many things, and that is the thing that is usually underestimated. What is even out there that we could write an OKR about? And then how could we cluster and prioritize this? Are there contradictions? And also, how do we weigh the different input sources? So this is one of the most crucial things. Put everything into one map, basically, and understand what can I even choose from, which topics. And this also answers the question, how does OKRs relate to every other planning that we do? Because we often have maybe portfolio planning, or we have some sort of team goals that are set for the year. And I often get the question, how do we integrate these adjacent processes into the OKR process? And to me, usually the answer is like this. So if you have, if you open up kind of like the filter a bit to all the aspects that you could consider, whether it's team goals, cross-functional goals that are yearly, anything that could determine what your OKRs would be written about, that usually already integrates quite nicely the topics that you have in the other goals that you have into the OKR process. And here, by the way, there is a canvas about this as well, our drafting canvas that we can send out as well later, that helps you structure this too. So we have the same categories on this canvas, which is one, high-level factors, team-level factors, and then influencing factors. High-level factors is the top-down input, basically. High-level KPIs that we need to reach, high-level qualitative strategic input. So department strategies if I'm a team, or group strategies if I'm at the highest level. And then the high-level key results that are on the level above me. That's what I would consider. I would map everything onto there. What could we influence? The same things on the team level. Maybe we have team strategies we need to consider. Maybe we have, I don't know, if I'm if we see if I'm in an IT team and I see that we have maintenance issues, that's maybe something we should prioritize before everything else, because then our systems wouldn't be stable. So these are things that we need to kind of like consider on the team level. And then we have, of course, customer insights, cross-functional commitments we have already kind of like committed in the beginning of the year, and maybe other stakeholder requirements. And if you map everything that you can consider into these factors, you have an overview of what could be potentially important. You will see contradictions. You will see things where the dynamics actually work well together, that maybe our own department strategy mixes nicely with what the customer wants. Having everything onto there can help you kind of like open up the topics on what to write OKRs about. And this is then where you can set the focus, right? Then you can say like, we have considered everything that is important, and nothing will surprise us and fly in from the side that is at least plannable in that situation. And you will be in the end able to have more focus because you have already considered the things that people could demand from you as well. So by having the entire transparency and knowing what exactly could there be as a focus topic, and then focusing on one or two, then you can kind of like argue for that as well. And you can even use this canvas to go to your stakeholders and say, listen, this is the map of all the things that we could have been working on. We know, however, because this and this is not negotiable, that we have one more thing we can work on, and we decided to do this because of the impact it has on the larger scale of the company. And this is why your topic needs to take a back seat, or we need to like replan during the next cycle. So this could be like a good sense-making tool as well for the stakeholders that do not get their topic catered to. Very well. So this is a helper on how to decide what to even work on. So just to recap, a couple of bad practices that I implicitly addressed when it comes to focus in OKR drafting. It's about not being mindful in selecting what to write OKRs about. That can kind of destroy your focus later, because people would just raise their hand and say like, wait, didn't you consider this? This could be important as well. And then you have to replan maybe if it's urgent enough. That's the first one. Then one myth about capacity management is that it's about micromanagement, but it's more about the teams that need to estimate how much time do we actually have. I have a finite pie of time in my calendar in the next cycle. So how do I want to spend that time? And in the end, maybe even reassessing, did I spend my time in the way that I planned to? And if not, why? This gives you so much more transparency and so much more empowerment also in the middle of the cycle to reprioritize. We're going to talk about that in a second as well. And one of the, let's say, basic tricks is limiting the number of OKRs according to your own capacity. You will take the capacity planning and the topics that you want and say like, how does that match? And then there is this kind of like 3 to 5 OKR rule out there that is a very good rule of thumb. However, it also depends on how big the portion is of the OKR, how much work does lay behind that. So making sure, to me, it's more important that it actually represents the capacity of the teams than the number of 5, for instance. If I have 7 small topics that have like very adamant owners for in a big team, then I could also say we have 7 OKRs. But it needs to correspond to the capacity that the team has, and that's the most important thing. So much for bad practices in focusing on OKR drafting. Then last topic is the check-ins. So we want to not only focus the planning, but also focus the execution. And this is why we talk about the check-ins as well. And here it's about getting transparency for your process and making sure that you're actually working in the way that you have planned in the beginning. So that the strategic focus that was applied for the vertical alignment and the focus that you have on the right topics decided in the drafting actually is implemented in the, let's say, time focus of the cycle. So let's have a look at when do we even do the check-ins and why. So of course we have the outcome level here, the customer values that we want to create and measurably validate through the key results. And we have then the output level, so the project management. If you don't do OKRs yet, you probably already do the project management to some degree. Some sort of execution is always there, right? We want to connect these two things though. So what we do is we deduce from the key results. That's the objective. This is the key results that pay into this. From the key results, we would deduce user stories, epics, to-dos, projects, and then go on after the kickoff of the OKR cycle, work on them and make sure that we execute them. However, just looking at the output level and executing the outputs would not be enough. We need to think, did the outputs actually impact our outcomes that we want to have? So did what we do actually have the effect that we wanted to achieve? So this is a question that we have to ask us in the check-ins. It says weekly check-ins here, but it's more important than any rule that we're going to give you, by the way, is that you make sure that this works for you. If you don't have weekly team meetings, if you don't, you work in an environment where weekly updates on OKRs is unrealistic, then don't do weekly check-ins. Do them in a frequency that fits your schedule and that also fits the pre-existing meetings that you have. So this is an advice for you in general. Integrating everything that we have already in our meeting structure with the OKR framework. So this is why we do check-ins. We check back on the initiatives that we have drafted and see, did they have the impact on the key result? Did they move the needle? And then, of course, there is a couple of best practices on how to conduct these check-ins. So in the general, they bring back the focus on the OKRs. So this probably will have integrated this into a meeting where we talk about operative goals, conflict in the team, any team meeting, like any other topic. But one portion, maybe the last 20 minutes, should be reserved for check-ins. So having check-ins meeting where we discuss what have we done so far and how did that impact the OKRs. And it's, of course, important also to have some sort of escalation process. We need to see, like, why didn't we move on this? Oh, we're still lacking a contribution from another team. We need to get that in order to move on. So let's escalate it. So this is one of the most important things, have action items out of the check-ins. Then you would, of course, discuss the contributions and maybe even adjust your capacity planning. One of our customers is working right below the board, for instance, and they are kind of they always set a very low number of OKRs because they know there's so many ad hoc topics. However, when that does not come and when the ad hoc blockers are not used, then they can just have, oh, there's a project that fits nicely that we could still do to kind of impact this OKR, and maybe we can expand our capacity that we have planned for that OKR. So adjusting your capacity planning and seeing the planning that I did before, the capacity split, the finite pie, am I distributing that in the way that I intended? And if not, what do we have to change? And this is one of the most important things that most teams don't do. Get somebody to reprioritize your time if your capacity limit is maxed out. Reprioritize. That's the most important thing. I have so many teams that say, like, I'm 110% planned, and that's not functional. That's not working. So there's something we need to drop. And sometimes we cannot decide that ourselves, but this is why we have managers and leaders to decide to take this finite pie and say, like, what do we not do? And this is one of the most empowering things about check-ins and the capacity planning, because then you can actually say, like, I have this list of things I need to do, and I have this time, it doesn't match. What drops off the list? And no matter how you do that, if you do that in a stand-up way and in person, if you do that with a system, it does not really matter. The important thing is that you have the conversation around it. And of course, you should update your progress levels and the check-ins and see, like, did we actually move the needle? Adjust your confidence level maybe. So we have a confidence level from 1 to 10 that we set for every goal, and understanding, is that still realistic? And having the opinion of the others in the team, do you think that's still realistic? And maybe lowering the confidence level as a stakeholder communication tool is also quite crucial. So make sure that you are communicating to the others what you're focusing on and how your focus maybe has shifted. If you, for instance, realize we have to set a confidence level to 0 or to 1, you need to communicate that to all the others, that this is not what you're focusing on anymore. So focus is not only about maintaining your own focus, but also communicating about it. And yeah, it's also a great moment to, like, share kudos and, like, share learnings and insights, and making sure that we're staying engaged and motivated. But that's just a side note. So when it comes to creating focus through check-ins, of course, it is important to make the system work for the teams. And one of the most important things is integrating the check-ins into the existing meetings. What we don't want is that OKRs are just like, additional work that does not really provide value. So create them in a way, not only time-wise and the first aspect here, but also in like a structure, the structural way that is benefiting the teams and it's working for them. And especially in the check-ins, ask them, does this work for you? This is the purpose that we have. Does it work for you in the way that we're doing it right now? And if not, change it. So this is in this case, the people who are introducing OKRs need to consider the teams as their customers, right? We're providing a service for you through introducing OKRs, and let's make sure it actually works for you. Yeah, and then something that is a very big opportunity is to kind of differentiate the initiatives from the key results and the outcomes that we have. So something that most of our customers struggle with is differentiating output and outcome when it comes to drafting. We have a lot of customers that have check-ins that have OKRs that in their check-ins, they realize, oh, what I have as an initiative is actually the same thing as my key result. So maybe I should make a mental note, or in my improvement backlog for my OKR retro, that I should maybe adjust this a bit better and make sure that there is a clear differentiation between what I do and the effect that I want to have. So the output and the outcome, the initiatives and the OKRs. And yeah, one of the most important things I already mentioned that is for the check-ins is to actually deduce action items and make sure that through the check-ins, we can deduce steps that will help us focus more in the next sprint or in the next period between one check-in and the next. So make sure that you're not only having the check-in conversations to keep let's say, to get the focus back on the OKRs, if it's drowned out by the everyday work, but also make sure that you're deducing concrete action items that have the principal focus in mind. So yeah, these are the bad practices that I wanted to share with you about the check-in conversations. And just to recap the 3 best practices that we just discussed, we discussed the vertical alignment, making sure that we are providing some sort of strategic focus from the top to the teams, focus in drafting, enabling and empowering the teams to set their own filters and to set their own focus, considering all the input sources based on the available capabilities and capacities, and then just determining their own focus, what they want to focus on. And of course, let's say the process focus in the course of the execution phase, having check-ins to focus back on the topics that we wanted to discuss, or the outcomes that we wanted to achieve. Very good. So I see already a couple of questions in the Q&A section. And I will give you a bit of time to add more questions. And in the meantime, we can already go through the questions that we already have here in our Q&A module. And I would ask you to not use the chat for the questions, because it might be drowned out by comments or interactions from you as the participants. So the first question from Rianne, good to hear from you again. So the first one is, at a group level, we are struggling to make clear OKRs, not more than 2 or 3, as we are trying to give clear intent, but also to make it but also not to make it too narrow, as we have a very diversified portfolio of companies within the group. How do you get this focus right at such a level? So PS, I know your customer, shareholder, employee approach, but our board seems to prefer to do it around strategic business topics. So what Rihanna is referring to is that we usually use when it comes to top level OKRs, we have a split of 3. So one is all the topics that are about the shareholders, all the topics that are about our customers, and the employees. So usually we recommend to have 3 OKRs on the top level that maybe even the topics that you, Rihanna, have can be clustered into. So I think the most important thing is from the top level is that we want to have, the last thing you want to have is output in those key results. So have OKRs that are completely metric driven. And sometimes it can help to use even the things the metrics that you use as KPIs in those on the company level as the key result. And then kind of like deducing, so if we want to have more engagement with our online audience, maybe that's something that's like a metric that is represented even in the KPIs that you set for yourself. And I think it's kind of a hard thing to answer generally, because it depends on how much impact or like how much guidance do your teams actually need. And here I would suggest to draft OKRs on the top level with feedback and input from the direct reports, because I have worked with companies that are very fine just having OKRs on the top level that are just the KPIs, basically with a header and with a definition of what impact do we wish for on a yearly level through reaching these KPIs. So I've seen that work. I've also had customers that say, like, I want you to tell me exactly how we're going to achieve that. So it's kind of a cultural aspect more. And here I would strongly recommend to work with the direct reports and on finding that sweet spot, because what the right level of focus and like what is too narrow is kind of hard to just say from the outside. It's a matter of like, what do the leaders on the lower level, on the level below you, see as too narrow. So I would engage highly in a conversation with them, and maybe even try to open the suggestion even before you start writing OKRs on the organization level. Open kind of like the suggestions from the levels below, to kind of figure out what, if they would write OKRs on top level, what would they write about and what would be the topics. So this is how you could get a good top down and bottom up input. All right. So we have another question from an anonymous participant. OKR should be challenging and the target level is rarely reached. So 60 to 70% is great. How does this relate to planning such OKRs that are surely going to reach with the capacity you have? So what you're alluding to is the concept of moonshot OKRs. And this is something that is widespread with everybody who has read any Google OKR book or Measure What Matters. I have personally, we work a lot with bigger global corporations, and I personally don't have any customers that really stick to that rule. So it's more about, to them, they rarely have the culture where it's fine to only reach a goal with like 70%. This would only be the case if the entire company is doing OKRs and there's a high understanding for every level of management above you that this is okay. So this is rarely what happens. So there are a couple of cases where I actually assume, well, it's basically I have a mixed portfolio of OKRs. If I as a department have maybe 5 OKRs in general, I have one that is a moonshot goal or 2. and the rest are the committed ones. Then the best practice is to kind of signal that and say like moonshot colon and then the OKR, and the other one as a committed goal or without any indication, because that's a default, you know. So what I would recommend is to have a good split between that, but I believe that does not really relate that much to the capacity, because in the end, it's probably the moonshot topics are the ones that we don't really know how much impact we can have with the capacity that we can muster for this topic. So in the end, what we want is to kind of have a conversion of capacity into OKR achievement, right? And that's also nothing we can actually promise for capacity planning. All we can promise is that it becomes a bit more transparent. So I would actually say that it does not really impact it that much if you how much of a goal achievement you go, because the 60 and 70% approach is not that we don't put enough. It's more about like we put a lot of effort into this and as much as we can, but we know that the chances are slim that we're going to achieve 100%. So yeah, that's how I would deal with that. So one question, the next one question we are facing now in our organization is how to ensure accountability of multiple teams on a shared objective. When said objective impacts multiple teams, we have thought of dissecting the objective into multiple objectives of which every team is accountable, but we fear working in silos and losing cross-communication. That's a very good point. So our best practice in this case is to have, so there's two options. One, if the topic is narrow enough, we would have different key results owned by different teams. So that would be, to me, the cross-functionality of the entire OKR. However, it depends on, the second option is, if you want to split them, then I understand that they would have separate OKRs that are in their own circle of influence, which is quite motivating because you don't have to kind of like wait on the others so much, or like collaborate with other teams that have a different rhythm maybe. But I do get the silo concern. However, what you could think of is how can we bridge that and how can we prevent that? So maybe there is a cross-functional check-in that you could do that would have that cross-communication topic covered and kind of like avoid that negative effect. To me, it depends how much dependencies, how tightly the dependencies are aligned. Do I need to talk to these people every day? Then I should have a common OKR. Or is it fine if I talk to them every 2 weeks and see what the status is, show what everybody has done and discuss the next steps? Then I would do a check-in, a cross-functional one. Hope that helped. So Roland has a question. What's the best way to organize teams which usually enable other teams to achieve their OKRs? They might not know yet which teams need and how much. So that is a good question. One mechanism that we work with are contribution requests. So if I know that I'm being kind of like requested a lot, and me as an enabling team, I enable internally, but also externally, I need to plan my capacity quite strictly. So what I would always do is, for the teams that are highly dependent on the other teams, I would do kind of a pre-alignment with them. So before I even start drafting OKRs, I would try to fill out the canvas that I showed you before, not this one, with actually the cross-functional commitments I would ask for them beforehand, because probably you won't be able to otherwise have realistic OKRs. And in this sense, I would also include this in the capacity planning that you do. So if you know that a portion of your work will be spent on working for other teams, you would need to ask them beforehand, like, how much do you think you need? And it's not about having the exact number and a commitment, but more like a wild guess, you know? I always say a crappy estimation is better than no estimation. And I think this is exactly the moment where this counts. Having a rough idea, how much are we needed from others, and how many topics can we put onto our own OKR backlog, so to say, that can already help. And the second thing that you could do is, if you have like usually you don't prioritize OKRs between them, but in this case, you can say like, this is the one we can commit. This is one we would definitely do. And maybe we have like 2 others that kind of depend on how much capacity the other teams after their planning realistically need from us. But what I would recommend is to get that information before you start the OKR cycle. So you can actually know like how many things can we actually commit and work on. All right, I hope that helped. So Gerrit asks, my issue as an OKR coach is something that was not even mentioned in the slides. The challenge that the teams are really way beyond 100% occupied with operational work. What would be your input? So this is a good example for a situation that is outside of the OKR, so to say. So this is one of the things that OKRs often brings things to the surface that don't have anything to do with OKRs, and that should be addressed separately. However, you could collect data, so to say, on this problem. If you work with these teams and you do some sort of capacity estimation in Excel or in a tool or whatever, then you can say like, look, this is what the planning looks like. We cannot, either we don't work on OKRs and we don't write OKRs, or we only write initiatives that contribute to other people's OKRs. That's also an option, but we want to realistically plan. And this is something that there's a question, do these teams that work highly with operational aspects even write OKRs? And there's kind of like a mixed answer. I don't have a clear answer about this because it depends on the culture and on what what OKRs represent for you. You could have these teams put their operational work into OKRs. That would, however, water down a bit the definition of an OKR, which is a strategic implementation tool. And on the other hand, that could help to make OKRs more relevant to the teams that not only work with strategy. So it's kind of like there's no perfect answer. There will always be a drawback, but we have to mitigate maybe the negative consequences in this case. So yeah, we also have a webinar, by the way, about operational versus strategic work that we have done, I think, 2 months ago. And yeah, maybe there's a link, Teresa, that you could share in the chat on that, or in the wrap-up email. So maybe that topic will be a bit clearer then. All right, so next one. Are you familiar with business units linking to objectives instead of key results? Key results are more descriptive and the obvious choice for focus. Objectives, on the other hand, provide more room for creativity. So to us, an OKR is the objective and the key results are 2 sides of the same coin. They should represent the exact same content. So this is where we differ sometimes from other ways of drafting OKRs. We have an objective that is constituted out of a customer, a value, and a future state that we describe. And we go into that sentence, and from there, even underline all the promises we're making in this, all the value propositions that we are posing, and from there, deduce a key result for each of these value propositions. So in our book, there is no content difference between an objective and a key result. I would always align to a key result because that is, to me, that is the metric, right? I want to see an impact on that metric. And if I just align generally on the key result, I don't even know what value am I trying to support here. What kind of, if I want to make a process faster, more effective, and more efficient, I write 3 key results: one for the effective, one for the efficient, and one for the fast aspect. And if I then align to the objective in general, then I don't even know, like, am I trying to do it faster or more efficient, or like what even is the promises that I'm trying to support? So this is why I would always see the key result as the thing that you align with. Oftentimes we have the output and the key result in these situations, which is, to me, double work for the teams, because we already do that. We already do that in the projects, in our backlogs. There's a lot of double work involved if you have a low quality of OKRs. So have the key results, metrics, actual numbers that you can impact that represent a certain promise that you're making in the objective. We also have a great template for that, so maybe we can also include that in the wrap-up mail. All right. So as an enabling team, we find it difficult to set outcome-based or key results and metrics. Any tips and insights that you could share? So I think I'm having a bit of trouble to sort the enabling team into the right category. So what I feel sometimes is the impact that we have is usually on our customers, and that's usually the internal customers. If I'm a service unit, me, for instance, if I help my colleagues from product to develop a feature because I give input, then the outcome that I want to achieve is that the people in product are happy about what I did, right? If I provide a process for a new, travel reimbursement system, then the people who are using this are my customers, right? But the internal customers, the people that are actually using my internal systems and not the end customer. So the outcomes we want to achieve is who benefits from our work. And I think going back to that question is usually the key to this. Wondering who am I providing value for and how can I measure if I'm actually doing that? And if I don't have the metrics for it, we have that problem a lot in HR, for instance, where we don't have the systems to, monitor development for paths or whatever. We just ask the people. We don't have to have the metrics. Sometimes is 9 out of 10 people in our focus group says our new HR development paths are top-notch, and it helps us to foster our careers. So don't always get stuck on like the scientific validity of a key result, but be free to kind of like say, like, how can I test this hypothesis that through my new, development path program, I've actually had an impact? Ask the people who have actually done this and maybe done a course that was suggested through your development plans. So this is a good way to figure that out.